Look, I need to get this off my chest because this situation has been years in the making, and it all exploded this week. My parents, Leonard and Linda, have always treated me like I was some kind of burden they couldn't wait to get rid of. But what happened Tuesday pushed me over the edge. I'm 23, work full-time at a logistics company, and yeah, I was still living at home. Before you start with the get your own place comments, hear me out. I've been saving every penny for the last 2 years, specifically because I knew this day would come. My parents have this weird thing where they act like providing basic parenting is some massive favor they're doing me, and they've been dropping hints about wanting me out since I turned 18. The thing is, my cousin Wesley moved to our city for college 3 years ago, and my parents have been obsessed with him ever since. Wesley is the golden child, straight-A student, pre-med, the whole package. Meanwhile, I'm just the son who disappointed them by not wanting to be a doctor. I went to community college for business instead of a 4-year university, which apparently makes me a complete failure in their eyes. Tuesday. I'm at work when my phone starts blowing up. First text from my dad. Leonard, we gave your room to Wesley. Pack your stuff by Friday or it goes in the trash. You're 23. Stop being a parasite. Then my mom Linda chimes in. If you complain, don't bother coming home for holidays ever again. We're done with your drama. I'm sitting there staring at my phone in the break room thinking this has to be some kind of joke. These people really just kicked me out via text message while I'm at work. But it gets better. Dad sends another one. Wesley pays us $800 a month. You pay nothing. Get out. Now here's where it gets really twisted. I haven't been paying rent because they told me not to. 2 years ago, when I suggested paying them something, my mom said, "Don't be ridiculous. You're our son, not a tenant." She made this whole speech about how family takes care of family and I should focus on saving money for my future. I took her advice and saved almost everything from my job. So I drive home that night thinking, maybe we can talk this through like adults. Wrong. The locks are already changed. There's garbage bags with my stuff sitting in the garage like I'm some kind of squatter they evicted. And the kicker? My mom posted on Facebook, finally getting our house back from ungrateful children, with a bunch of laughing emojis. I stood there looking at those garbage bags and something just clicked. All those years of being treated like a disappointment, all the subtle digs about how Wesley is so much better than me, all the times they made me feel like I was lucky they even let me exist in their house. I was done. Dad sent one more text that night. Don't call crying. You had 23 years of free rent. Like he was doing me some huge favor by not charging his minor child rent for the first 18 years of my life. But here's what my parents don't know. Remember how I said I've been saving every penny for 2 years? I've got enough money to put a down payment on a house. Not rent an apartment. Buy an actual house. While they think I'm some broke loser with nowhere to go, I've been planning for exactly this scenario. I spent Wednesday getting all my stuff moved into a storage unit and staying at my friend Christian's place. Thursday, I had 3 different real estate agents showing me properties. My parents have no idea I've been pre-approved for a mortgage or that I've been planning my exit strategy since I turned 21. But the envelope I left under their door at 3 a.m. Friday morning? That's when things got interesting. See, there's something about Wesley they don't know. Something I found out completely by accident when I was helping him move some stuff last month. Wesley was complaining about having to pay my parents' rent because apparently he's been telling his friends that he's living there for free as family. He's been lying to them about the $800 because he thinks it makes him look bad that his aunt and uncle are charging him. But that's not even the best part. Wesley also mentioned he's only staying until he finishes this semester. Then he's moving in with his girlfriend. So my parents kicked me out and burned their relationship with their son for someone who's leaving in 3 months anyway. The envelope contained copies of Wesley's text messages to his friends about how he hates paying the rent and can't wait to move out, along with a simple note, ask Wesley about his real plans. You might want to start looking for a new tenant. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. Friday. First, my dad screaming, "What did you do? Your mom is crying. Answer your phone." Then my mom calling back to back, asking what I put in that envelope and demanding I come over to discuss this like adults. The same woman who kicked me out via text while I was at work now wants to discuss this like adults. The same man who told me not to call crying is now the one calling me crying. I haven't answered. I'm not playing their games anymore. They made their choice when they decided Wesley's $800 was worth more than having their son in their lives. Now they get to live with that choice. What really gets me is they actually thought I'd come crawling back begging for forgiveness. They thought I had nowhere to go and no options. They've spent so many years telling me I'm a failure that they actually believed it themselves. But I've got news for them. The parasite they kicked out? I'll be closing on my own house next month while they're scrambling to find someone to replace the rent money they're about to lose when Wesley moves out. The crazy part is this could have all been avoided if they just treated me like their son, instead of like some burden they were stuck with. But they burned that bridge, not me. Now, I'm watching my phone blow up with their panic calls, and honestly, I've never felt more free. Update 1 coming soon. Wesley had some interesting things to say when my parents confronted him about those text messages. Update 1. First off, thanks to everyone who commented on my last post. Some of you called it. My parents definitely thought I'd come crawling back. Well, they thought wrong. So remember how I left that envelope with Wesley's text messages? Saturday morning, my dad Leonard showed up at Christian's place where I've been staying. Christian answered the door and told him I wasn't there, which was true because I was at a house showing. But Leonard stood on the porch for 20 minutes, demanding to know what was in that envelope and yelling about how I was trying to destroy the family. Christian texted me the whole thing, and honestly, it was pathetic. My dad kept saying he just wanted to talk, that this was all a misunderstanding, that family comes first. The same man who kicked me out via text while I was at work suddenly wants to talk about family loyalty. When I got back, Christian filled me in on everything. Apparently, my dad looked rough, like he hadn't slept. He kept asking if I was really buying a house and where I was getting the money. Christian just shrugged and said maybe Leonard should have asked me these questions before changing the locks. But here's where it gets really good. Sunday afternoon, I'm looking at another house when Wesley calls me directly. Not my parents. Wesley himself. And he is pissed. Wesley starts off asking what the hell I was thinking, showing his private messages to my parents. He's going on about how it's none of my business what he tells his friends and I had no right to involve him in our family drama. I let him vent for a while. Then I asked him one simple question. Did you or did you not tell my parents you're moving out after this semester? Dead silence. Then Wesley gets defensive and starts explaining how he didn't want to hurt their feelings, but yeah, he's been planning to move in with his girlfriend Sophia since before he even moved into my room. He applied for an apartment with her back in February. The lease starts in May. So I asked him why he let my parents kick me out if he knew he was leaving anyway. More silence. Then he tries to justify it by saying my parents seemed really excited about him paying rent, and he didn't want to disappoint them. He actually said that. He didn't want to disappoint them by telling them the truth. This is where I lost it. I told Wesley that my parents destroyed their relationship with their son based on a lie, that they chose his rent money over their own child for someone who was never planning to stay. Wesley got all quiet and then tried to say that wasn't his responsibility, that this was between me and my parents. Wrong answer. I explained to Wesley exactly what his silence cost me, how I came home to garbage bags in the garage, how my mom posted on Facebook about being relieved to get rid of her ungrateful child, how my dad told me not to call crying after 23 years of free rent like he was doing me some favor by not charging his minor child rent. Wesley started backtracking real fast. He said he assumed my parents had talked to me about it first, that he didn't know they'd kicked me out via text. He thought it was a mutual decision, which is complete garbage because he literally helped them change the locks on Friday. Then Wesley asks if there's anything he can do to fix this. I told him, yeah, there is. Tell my parents the truth about your move-out date. Stop letting them think they've got guaranteed rent income. Stop pretending this was about anything other than money. Wesley agreed, but I could tell he was just trying to get off the phone. He kept saying he'd handle it and we'd work something out. But I know Wesley. He's going to try to smooth this over without taking any real responsibility. Monday morning, my mom Linda calls me 17 times. 17. I finally answered on the 18th call. She immediately starts with the guilt trip. How could I do this to them? How could I try to turn Wesley against them? How could I be so vindictive over a simple misunderstanding? I stopped her right there. I asked her what exactly was the misunderstanding. She couldn't answer. She tried to say they thought I'd be happier on my own, that they were doing me a favor by forcing me to be independent. I reminded her that she literally posted on Facebook about being relieved to get rid of me. Then Linda switches tactics and starts talking about how much money they've spent on me over the years, how I should be grateful for everything they've done, how other parents charge their kids rent from day one. I let her finish her speech. Then, I asked her why she told me not to pay rent 2 years ago when I offered. She actually tried to claim she never said that, said I must be remembering wrong. So I told her that if she really believed I owed them money for raising me, she could send me an itemized bill. But she'd better include everything, not just my expenses, but also the tax breaks they got for claiming me as a dependent, the insurance discounts for having a good student in the house, all of it. That shut her up real quick. Then she started crying and saying she just missed me and wanted me to come home, that Wesley was nice, but he wasn't her son, that they'd made a mistake and we could fix this as a family. I told her the mistake wasn't kicking me out. The mistake was thinking I'd come back begging. I've got my own life now, my own plans. And those plans don't include people who treat me like a burden they can dispose of whenever it's convenient. Linda kept saying we're family, And family forgives each other. I reminded her that she's the one who said not to bother coming home for holidays if I complained. That she's the one who said they were done with my drama. That she made it clear I wasn't family when it mattered. She couldn't argue with that because those were her exact words. The call ended with her begging me to just come by the house so we could talk in person. I told her I'd think about it, but honestly, I'm not sure there's any point. They showed me exactly how they feel about me, and all the crying and guilt trips in the world don't change that. The house I looked at Sunday is perfect, by the way. 3 bedrooms, decent yard, move-in ready. I'm putting in an offer tomorrow. My parents wanted me out of their house so badly they were willing to burn our relationship to the ground. Well, congratulations to them. They got exactly what they wanted. I'm out of their house permanently. What they didn't count on was me being prepared for it. What they didn't count on was me having options. And what they definitely didn't count on was Wesley having his own plans that don't include staying in my old room past May. Now they get to figure out how to replace that $800 a month rent they're about to lose. And they get to do it without their son around to help them deal with the consequences of their choices. I keep thinking about my mom's Facebook post. Finally getting our house back from ungrateful children. Well, she's about to find out what having their house back really means. No son around to help with yard work or house projects. No extra income from Wesley after he moves out. Just them and the consequences of treating their child like a tenant they could evict whenever they felt like it. The comments on my last post asking if I think they'll learn from this. Honestly, I doubt it. They'll probably find some way to blame me for Wesley leaving too. But that's not my problem anymore. Update 2. Coming soon. My parents showed up at my work today. HR was not happy. Update 2. You guys, I cannot believe what happened today. I thought my parents had hit rock bottom with the whole text message eviction thing, but apparently they were just getting started. So I'm at work Tuesday morning, normal day, when reception calls and says I have visitors. I'm thinking maybe it's something about the house closing or my real estate agent with paperwork. I walk to the lobby and there are my parents, Leonard and Linda, just standing there looking completely out of place in their casual clothes while everyone else is in business attire. My dad immediately starts talking loud enough for half the lobby to hear. He's going on about how I won't answer their calls and they need to talk to me and this whole situation has gone too far. People are staring. The receptionist looks uncomfortable. I'm standing there mortified that my parents are causing a scene at my workplace. I told them this wasn't the place for family discussions and they needed to leave. My mom, Linda, starts getting teary and says they just want their son back, that they miss me, that we can work this out. She's talking like I'm some runaway teenager instead of a 23-year-old adult who got kicked out of their house. Then my dad pulls out his phone and starts showing me bank statements. Apparently Wesley told them he's moving out in May and they're panicking about the money. Leonard is waving around these papers showing their monthly expenses and saying they need that $800 rent to make ends meet, that without it, they might have to downsize or take out loans. I'm trying to process this because for years, they acted like money was never an issue. They always had new cars, went on vacations, bought whatever they wanted. Now suddenly they're acting like they're struggling financially and need Wesley's rent to survive. Leonard keeps pointing at numbers on his phone screen, talking about the mortgage payment and utilities and how everything keeps getting more expensive. He's acting like Wesley's rent was some crucial part of their budget that they can't live without. But I'm standing there thinking about how just last month they bought a new dining room set and my mom got her hair done at that expensive salon she likes. My mom, Linda, is nodding along and saying they thought they could manage without the extra income, but now they realize how much they were counting on it. She keeps saying they never should have gotten used to having that money coming in, that it made them careless with their spending. That's when it hit me. I asked my dad point blank if the only reason they kicked me out was for the money. If this whole thing about me being a parasite and needing to be independent was just an excuse because they needed Wesley's rent payments. The look on his face told me everything. He couldn't answer. He just kept saying it was complicated and they thought I'd understand eventually and family needs to support each other. So I asked him why he never told me they needed money. Why he never asked me to pay rent if money was tight. Why they told me 2 years ago not to worry about paying anything and to focus on saving for my future. Leonard gets defensive and says they didn't want to burden me with their financial problems. That they thought if Wesley could help them out while I got on my feet, everyone would benefit. That they never meant for me to feel unwanted. But here's the thing. If they'd just been honest about needing money, I would have helped. I've got savings. I could have paid rent or helped with bills. Instead, they kicked me out via text message and let me think they just didn't want me around anymore. I told them this right there in the lobby. I said if you needed money, why didn't you just ask me? Why did you have to make me feel like garbage and kick me out like some deadbeat when I would have gladly helped with expenses? Leonard tries to backtrack and says they didn't want to burden me with their problems. that they thought I was just starting my career and needed to focus on building my own life. But I reminded him that he literally called me a parasite in his text message. That doesn't sound like someone who's trying to protect their son from financial burdens. My mom starts nodding frantically and saying that was just his temper talking, that he didn't mean it that way. She keeps saying they were just stressed about money and made bad decisions when they were panicking. But I pointed out that the Facebook post about being relieved to get rid of ungrateful children didn't sound like a stress reaction. It sounded like how they really felt. My mom starts crying harder and saying they made a mistake, that they handled it wrong, that they just want to fix this. She's begging me to come home and we can figure out a rent arrangement that works for everyone. Meanwhile, people are walking by giving us looks, and I realize this conversation is happening in my workplace lobby where my boss and coworkers can see everything. I told my parents we needed to take this outside. That's when my dad made the biggest mistake of the day. He refused to leave until I agreed to come home and discuss this properly. He actually said he wasn't moving until I promised to fix this family crisis I'd created. I told him I didn't create anything. I reminded him that he kicked me out, he changed the locks. He told me not to call crying. All I did was refuse to come back begging like he expected. Leonard got louder and started saying I was being stubborn and immature and that real men don't abandon their families over pride. He said I was punishing them for one mistake and acting like a spoiled child who didn't get his way. That's when security showed up. Apparently someone called them because my parents were disrupting the workplace. The security guard was this older guy who clearly dealt with these situations before. He approached calmly and asked if there was a problem. Leonard immediately got defensive and told the guard this was none of his business, that this was a family matter and they had every right to talk to their son. The guard explained that this was private property and they were disturbing other people trying to work. He asked them politely to take the conversation outside. My dad refused. He actually crossed his arms and said he wasn't leaving until this was resolved. He started telling the security guard about how I was tearing the family apart and he needed to make me understand what I was doing to them. The guard looked at me and asked if I wanted my parents to stay. I told him no. I said this was my workplace and they needed to leave. That's when my mom really started crying and saying I was choosing strangers over my own family. She kept reaching for my arm, trying to get me to look at her, while she begged me to just come home and talk this through properly. Security called for backup at that point because my parents clearly weren't going to leave voluntarily. When the second guard showed up, Leonard started getting loud again. He told them they were interfering with a family emergency and threatened to call the police himself if they didn't back off. The guards escorted them toward the exit while my dad kept yelling over his shoulder about how I was making the biggest mistake of my life. He said I'd regret this when they were gone, and I had nobody left who cared about me. My mom was still crying and calling my name like I was 5 years old and had gotten lost at the mall. I went straight to HR after that. My supervisor, Rory, was incredibly understanding about the whole thing. She said family situations happen, but my parents can't come to the workplace and cause disruptions. She documented everything in case they come back. Rory asked me if I felt safe and whether I thought my parents might try this again. I told her probably not at work since they got escorted out by security, but I couldn't guarantee they wouldn't try other things. She said she'd alert reception to call security immediately if they showed up again and asked if I needed any time off to deal with the situation. I appreciated that she didn't pry into the details or try to give me advice about reconciling with my family. She just treated it like what it was, a workplace security issue that needed to be handled professionally. She did ask if I had somewhere safe to stay and whether I needed any resources for housing assistance. When I told her I was closing on a house in 3 weeks, she looked surprised but pleased. The conversation with HR actually made me realize how far I've come from the person my parents think I am. They still see me as some helpless kid who needs them to survive. But here I am talking to my supervisor about mortgage closings and workplace security protocols, like a functioning adult. Their whole perception of me is stuck in the past, back when I actually did need their support and guidance. After the HR meeting, I had to go back to work and pretend everything was normal, while my coworkers kept giving me sympathetic looks. A few people asked if I was okay since they'd witnessed the lobby scene. I just said it was a family disagreement that got out of hand. Most people were cool about it, but I could tell it was going to be office gossip for a while. The worst part is, I actually felt bad for them for about 5 minutes. Seeing my mom cry and realizing they're apparently struggling financially made me wonder if I was being too harsh. But then I remembered that none of this had to happen this way. If they'd said, "Hey, we're having money trouble and Wesley offered to pay rent to help us out, would you be okay finding your own place?" I would have said yes. If they'd asked me to help with bills, I would have helped. If they'd been honest about their situation instead of making me feel like an unwanted burden, we could have worked something out. But that's not what they did. They kicked me out via text while I was at work. They changed the locks. They put my stuff in garbage bags like I was some deadbeat they were evicting. They posted on Facebook about being relieved to get rid of me. When I got home from work, Christian was waiting with updates. Apparently, my parents drove by his place 3 times looking for my car. They also called his mom, asking if she knew where I was staying permanently. They're getting desperate, and it's making them do increasingly crazy things. The house offer I put in yesterday got accepted, by the way. I'm closing in 3 weeks. 3 weeks and I'll be a homeowner while my parents are scrambling to figure out how to replace the rent money they're losing when Wesley moves out. What really gets me is they could have had both. They could have had their son and Wesley's rent money if they'd just been honest adults about their financial situation. Instead, they chose to lie and manipulate and kick me out, thinking I'd have no choice but to come back on their terms. Now they're facing the reality that I don't need them anymore. I've got my own place, my own life, my own plans. The son they kicked out thinking he had nowhere to go is buying his own house while they're panicking about making ends meet. I keep thinking about what my dad said about real men not abandoning their families. But who abandoned who here? Who decided their relationship with their son was worth less than $800 a month? Who chose to destroy trust instead of having an honest conversation? They're calling this a family crisis I created, but all I did was refuse to come crawling back after they threw me away. Apparently, that makes me the villain in their story. The comments asking if I'll eventually forgive them, I honestly don't know. Maybe if they'd handled today differently. Maybe if they'd taken responsibility instead of making it my fault. Maybe if they'd shown up with apologies instead of demands. But showing up at my workplace and causing a scene? Getting escorted out by security while screaming about how I'm destroying the family? That just proved they still don't understand what they did wrong. They want their son back now that they realize Wesley isn't a permanent solution to their money problems. But they want me to come back on their terms, like nothing happened. Like, they didn't show me exactly how little I meant to them when they thought they had a better option. Update 3 coming soon. Wesley called with some news that changes everything. Final update. So, this is it. The final update. Some of you have been following this whole mess since it started, and I figured you deserve to know how it all ended. First off, I closed on my house Thursday morning. 3 bedrooms, decent neighborhood, completely mine. Walking out of that title company office with the keys in my hand was honestly one of the best moments of my life. After everything that happened with my parents kicking me out and treating me like some burden they couldn't wait to get rid of, I'm now a homeowner at 23 while they're scrambling to figure out their finances. Christian helped me move my stuff from storage over the weekend. It's weird having my own space after living with my parents for so long, but it's a good weird. I can eat what I want, watch what I want, come and go without explaining myself to anyone. The freedom is incredible. But of course, my parents couldn't just let me move on in peace. Wesley apparently told them my address. I'm not even mad at him for it anymore because what happened next needed to happen eventually. Sunday afternoon, I'm unpacking boxes when I hear a car in the driveway. I look out and there are Leonard and Linda walking up to my front door. I almost didn't answer. Part of me wanted to just let them knock and eventually leave, but I realized that avoiding this conversation forever wasn't realistic. They were going to keep pushing boundaries until we had it out properly. So I opened the door. My mom, Linda, immediately started crying when she saw me. She kept saying how sorry she was and how much she missed me and how beautiful the house was. My dad, Leonard, looked around the front yard and asked how I could afford this place on my salary. Even in his apology visit, he couldn't resist questioning my capabilities. I let them come inside because I didn't want the neighbors watching us have a family drama on my front porch. They sat on my couch, the same couch that used to be in their basement, and looked around like they couldn't believe I'd actually pulled this off. Leonard started the conversation by saying they'd made mistakes, but they wanted to work things out as a family, that they never meant to hurt me, and they'd learned from this experience. He kept using phrases like miscommunication and misunderstanding, like this was all just some simple mix-up. I stopped him right there. I told him this wasn't a miscommunication. This was them choosing Wesley's rent money over their relationship with their son. This was them kicking me out via text message while I was at work and putting my belongings in garbage bags like I was some tenant they were evicting. Linda tried to interrupt and say they were just stressed about money and made bad decisions. That they thought I'd be happier on my own, and they were trying to help me become independent. I reminded her about the Facebook post celebrating getting rid of ungrateful children. I asked her how that was supposed to help me become independent. She couldn't answer that. Then Leonard tried a different approach. He started talking about how family forgives each other and how we all make mistakes. He said they'd learned their lesson and it would never happen again. That they wanted me to come home for family dinners and holidays like nothing had changed. I asked him what exactly they'd learned. He said they learned not to make big decisions when they were stressed about money, that they should have talked to me first before asking Wesley to move in. Wrong answer. I told him the lesson should have been that you don't treat your children like disposable sources of income, that you don't kick someone out because you found a better financial deal, that you don't post on social media about being relieved to get rid of your own son. Leonard got defensive and said I was being dramatic, that lots of parents charge their kids rent, and I was lucky they'd supported me as long as they did. He started going back to the same arguments about how expensive it was to raise children and how I owed them for all those years. That's when I realized nothing had actually changed. They still didn't understand what they'd done wrong. They were just sorry about the consequences, not sorry about their actions. So I laid it out for them clearly. I told them that I was done being treated like a burden or an obligation, that if they wanted a relationship with me going forward, it would be on my terms. No more guilt trips about money, no more comparisons to Wesley or other people's kids, no more treating me like I should be grateful they didn't abandon me completely. Linda started crying harder and saying she just wanted her son back, that she'd do anything to fix this. Leonard kept saying I was being unreasonable and holding a grudge over one mistake. I told them it wasn't one mistake. It was years of making me feel like I was never good enough. Years of acting like supporting their own child was some huge favor they were doing me. The eviction was just the final straw that showed me how they really felt. Then I explained the terms. If they wanted me in their lives, they needed to accept that I was an adult who didn't need their permission or approval for my choices. They needed to stop treating me like I owed them something for basic parenting. And they needed to genuinely apologize for how they'd handled this situation. Not just say sorry because they missed me. Leonard said I was asking too much and that no parent should have to apologize for trying to teach their child independence. He actually said that kicking me out was tough love and I should thank them for forcing me to grow up. Linda looked at him like he'd lost his mind. She told him to stop talking and turned back to me. She said she was sorry for how they'd handled everything and that she understood why I was hurt. But then she asked when I'd be ready to move past this and come home for dinner. She still didn't get it. She thought this was something I needed to get over instead of something they needed to fix. I told them both that I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to punish them or get revenge. I'd built a good life without them, and I was genuinely happy. But I also wasn't going to pretend like what they did was okay just because they were sorry about the consequences. The conversation went in circles for another hour. They kept trying to minimize what they'd done and get me to agree to family dinners and holiday visits like before. I kept explaining that the relationship they were remembering never really existed. They'd always treated me like a burden. I just used to accept it. Eventually, Leonard got frustrated and said I was being stubborn and vindictive, that real men don't hold grudges against their families over money disagreements, that I was going to regret cutting them off when I was older and needed their support. I told him I didn't need their support anymore, that I had my own house, my own job, my own life, that the son they kicked out thinking he had nowhere to go was doing just fine without them. Linda begged me one more time to just come to dinner next Sunday, to give them a chance to show me things could be different. I told her maybe someday, but not yet, that they needed to think about why this happened and what they really wanted from a relationship with me. They left after that. Linda hugged me goodbye and said she loved me. Leonard shook my hand and said he hoped I'd come to my senses eventually. The thing is, I have come to my senses. I finally understand that my parents see me as an obligation, not a son. They want me in their lives because that's what families are supposed to do, not because they actually enjoy my company or value my presence. Maybe that will change someday. Maybe they'll figure out how to have a relationship with me that isn't based on guilt and obligation. But that's their work to do, not mine. For now, I'm happy in my house. I've got friends who actually want to spend time with me. I've got a job where my supervisor respects me as an adult. I've got a life that doesn't involve constantly trying to prove I'm worth keeping around. Wesley moved out last week, by the way. My parents are advertising the room for rent online now. Christian showed me the listing. They're asking $900 a month now instead of the $800 Wesley was paying. Apparently, they realized they could get more money from a stranger than they were getting from family, which pretty much sums up everything you need to know about Leonard and Linda. To everyone who's been following this story and giving advice, thank you. A lot of you told me early on that this wasn't really about money. It was about respect. You were right. My parents never respected me as an adult, and they probably never will. But that's okay. I respect myself enough now to not need their approval. The kid who used to think he needed to earn his place in the family is gone. The man who bought his own house at 23 knows exactly what he's worth, and it's more than $800 a month. Thanks for reading, Reddit. This account is going inactive. Time to focus on my new life.